born on 1/9/21. I am Rita Shapiro. Bernice, could you state for the record which war and which branch of the service you served in, and what was your rank and where did you serve?
I was in the Army Nurse Corps and served with the 70th General Hospital in primarily in North Africa and Italy. I was stationed at O'Reilly General Hospital in Missouri for a few months before going overseas. I was discharged with the rank of captain.
Very good. Tell me, what made you enlist? You did enlist, right?
Yes, yes.
And why did you enlist?
I think for the adventure, a lot, and to help. And my father had been in World War I, and he was always a very patriotic person, so that was the way I was brought up. And so it was to help my country too.
And you felt it was your duty to,
right,
to do that.
And there weren't any sons in the family to serve, so.
Where were you living at the time?
When I enlisted, I had just finished school at St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri.
Nursing course?
Yes.
And did you get a degree?
Yes.
Good.
A Bachelor of Science degree.
Yeah, wonderful. And now you went after you enlisted, you went directly to the hospital? And did you get any training beforehand?
No,
no.
We reported to O'Reilly General Hospital in Springfield, Missouri, and it was kind of on-the-job training. Of course, we were already nurses, so we knew how to take care of patients.
Yeah, I just thought maybe there might be some Army work that you might have.
When we got through taking care of patients, we had to go to classes about some Army protocol and do drilling.
You did have to do drilling.
Yes, in the hot Missouri afternoon sun, and that was not easy.
It wasn't, not after a full day's work.
Right.
Particularly, yes. Well, that's interesting. Can you recall your first days there and what was going through your mind? I mean, how you felt about the whole situation?
I reported for active duty on St. Patrick's Day in '43, and had taken the train from St. Louis to Springfield, and in the morning at breakfast met several other nurses who were also from St. Louis but from other schools, so I hadn't known them there, but we became close friends in the service. Served in the service and with a couple of them until we came home. And they were also with the 70th General. It's quite a few people. The 70th General Hospital was sponsored by St. Louis University, so quite a few nurses in the St. Louis area signed up with that unit. And well, it was all kind of overwhelming and exciting. We met lots of people at that point in time. We lived in wooden barracks, all attached. The hospital was a wooden barrack too, but it was all attached by wooden pathways, elevated wooden pathways. That was kind of different. And there we had kind of a luxurious atmosphere. The nurses had their own mess hall, and we had good food. We had private rooms.
Individual?
It kind of spoiled us for later on, but that was all right. It was a nice beginning. And we began taking care of patients right away. We had a lot. There were two or three different types of military units in the area, primarily for basic training for young men. We had 18, 19-year-olds who, one of them was a pre-flight school, I remember. And a lot of these young men had been transported from California for their basic training. and they were, it was the spring of the year, and at that time, there weren't very many vaccinations against childhood illnesses. And everybody, in the spring, it was prevalent to have measles, mumps, chickenpox, both kind of measles. So every morning we made rounds checking people for rashes or swollen glands for mumps, and we often found them. And then they had to be, by that time everybody was, with the close living conditions that everybody was in, why it spread very rapidly. So, and then we got a few patients back from the South Pacific who had been wounded, and were transported to there. But,
in other words, your first patients, or perhaps all of your patients, were local people who had the diseases, or were there any? You had a few returned from the war, from the front.
Yeah. Well, they weren't really local people. They were.
They were stationed there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was a lot of it.
I was wondering, what you said you got to work immediately. I was wondering what kind of cases you had.
Yeah, well, that was a lot of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the type of ward I worked on. Mm-hmm. Our hospital, the 70th General, was gathering in Texas, but we never made it to Texas. We met up with them in August in Camp Shanks, New York, which is down at Orange, New York, on the Hudson River. And we went by train, an unair-conditioned car. They had to drag out all the old railroad cars, even though most trains were air-conditioned at that point. That was about the only time you saw air conditioning, was the train and the theater. But this was an old, it was a Pullman, but the ride from St. Louis to Camp Shanks was very hot. And dirty because we had to have windows open for ventilation. Yes. And the engines were still burning coal, so we got all the coal.
And there were no screens.
No, nothing. So it was not the most pleasant ride, but still, we had this wondering, where are we going, and how are we going to end up, and so on. So we stayed in Camp Shanks, I think, about a week, and then we received a lot of injections and had a lot of paperwork to do and so on. It seemed like it kept us busy, and they wouldn't let us off base. The play Oklahoma was big in New York City right then. We wanted to get in there and see it because we weren't that far from New York. And no way. And one of the girls in the unit, his mother was in New York, and she couldn't even see her. They were very strict, very. And one day they told us we were going to be getting on the train that night to go down to get on a ship. And we still didn't know where we were going, whether we were going to England or to, where. Had no thought of where we were going. And we got on the train, and we had to have the shades pulled. Everything was very hush-hush then. There was this motto, loose lips sink ships. And so we had to have the shades drawn, and we were not to say a word. We weren't to talk. I don't know why, but
how long was this?
It was at least, it must have been almost a 2-hour train ride, from the time we got on the train till we finally got.
And you couldn't even talk to each other?
No. One of my friends started to say something, just spontaneously, and she was immediately very severely reprimanded. And so there we were. And then we got to where we were going to get off, and it was at, I believe it was Staten Island. And we get off the train and all the lights are on, the bands are playing, there's millions of people around. You know, it was kind of disgusting for when we were supposed to have been so quiet so that nobody would know we were there. And here we get off into this. And the Red Cross was there giving out coffee and donuts. And we got on the ship right away.
Was it a big carrier ship?
No, it wasn't. It was actually a small ship owned by the Coast Guard. I believe. It was
And were
called
you the only
Kendrick.
ones on board, or were there?
No, there were other units on too. I don't remember what, but I know there were other units
Women
besides.
and men? I mean,
Yes, yes, oh yeah, yeah. Because by this time we had met up with the other people from the 70th General, and we were, you know, there were doctors, there were corpsmen, and you know, medical technicians, everybody, the whole hospital contingent. There were a little over 100 nurses, and we saw, if you remember the ship, the Normandy, that caught on fire, that was next to us. We saw part of that, and or it was right there in the harbor where we were. And this was like midnight or so that we were doing all this, and we were shown to bunks. Like I say, quite a switch from our luxury living in Springfield. And because I was small, I got a top bunk, which was hot. You know, the ship wasn't air conditioned really. And you got all the smells of the oil and the food. It was, you know, it was
no
not the most
portholes? No porthole?
I don't remember a porthole in our room. I really don't. It was an inner room.
It was.
Yeah, it was. And
How
we
many
spent
of
a
you-
lot of time up on deck to
Yeah.
get
How many
air.
of you in the room?
At least 5.
Hmm.
And only saltwater showers, no freshwater showers. And that was share with a large number of other people. So, and we did have a nice dining room, and we were served. The ship was owned by the Coast Guard and manned by the merchant. Oh, no, you know, I'm wrong. That was a merchant marine ship. It was a Coast Guard ship we came home on. It was a merchant marine ship. It was manned by the merchant marine, and we did sit at tables and were waited on in the dining room, or whatever they call it on the ship, mess hall, or no, that's Army, whatever.
Yeah.
And it was a day or two later that we learned that we were going to Oran,
Okay.
North Africa. Well, at that point in time, my geography was not too great. And I was thinking Iran,
Oh,
you know, and I thought, oh, we're going way over there. We won't even be anywhere near the war.
Right.
Because, of course, that would have been down at the other end of the Mediterranean. But finally, I got set straight of where Oran was. And Oran, Algiers, Algeria.
How long were you on the boat?
I think we were on
The
about
ship.
5 days. And of course, we went by the Rock of Gibraltar. We spent a lot of time on deck, as I say, and everybody got sunburned because we weren't careful. And we got off the ship in Oran at night. We were in a convoy of about 6 other ships. And of course, they had to be very careful. I didn't know until years later about the U-boats being so close to the eastern shore of the United States, and that they had, you know, that people along in North Carolina and down that way had seen bombing at night and so on. Or it might have been more scary, but we really weren't that worried. The ships communicated by their flags, their colored flags, because when we first got on, everybody wore headscarves in those, and we had headscarves on. Well, we couldn't wear them because the colors confused the signal, so we had to get rid of those. And we got off in Oran, as I said, in the middle of the night, and we didn't know.
Excuse me, may I ask one more? Did
Sure.
you do any training or anything like that? Or was it just while you were on board?
No,
Okay.
not that I recall.
Okay.
I don't even know. You know, they left us pretty much on our own.
Yes.
It's just,
Mhm.
you know,
All right, then you got off at Oran.
yes, in the middle of the night. Again, not knowing what we were getting into. And we weren't sure. We had canteens for water that held about a pint of water. And we were told to be sure we had water. And we had, and of course they took care of transporting our duffel bags for us that had all our belongings. And we had a little, what do they call those small bags we carried?
Knapsacks, like knapsacks?
Well, something like that, yeah, something we could wear. And then we had, we'd been issued purses too.
Yes.
And
But not much, you didn't have much baggage.
no,
Yeah.
no.
Mhm.
And we got off and we were transported by truck to an area where there were a lot of tents. And we were told where our tent was, and we found it and went to bed. And the next morning, we didn't know what there was. We had this little canteen of water, so we each did a sponge bath, and then we pooled our water and washed our undies from the day before because we weren't sure what there was. Well, then later we found out that there were showers. There was water pipes after we'd done all that. And we couldn't go to breakfast until they told us it was our turn. And we had to take these metal mess kits. That was the first time we'd used them. And went to breakfast and went through a chow line. And that was kind of a shock because we got tomato juice in your cup, and then you had to drink it before you got to where the coffee was, and there wasn't any chance to rinse it out in between. I've never really cared for tomato juice that much since. And the eggs, the scrambled eggs were powdered eggs, and the only way you could eat them was with ketchup on them. And again, that combination of scrambled eggs and anything with tomatoes in it does not appeal to me. And then we had to take care of washing those, so we were on the seashore. We were on the Mediterranean, just outside Oran. And we went down to the seashore and scrubbed our mess kits with sand, and then I think there was some boiling water someplace in a thing too that we could dip them in. So they had sent a total of 6 hospitals, 3 general hospitals and 3 station hospitals, which were slightly smaller, in that convoy that we were in, because they expected a large number of wounded on the invasion of Sicily. Well, they didn't have the number of wounded that they anticipated, and they had nothing for us to do. We sat there on the beach from August until about the 1st of November. And we went swimming every day, and it was a hard war.
Vacation.
Yes, yes. I can always say I vacationed on the Mediterranean.
Yes.
And we had to do a few things. They wouldn't let us just stay in bed all day. We had to get up and do calisthenics in the morning, and and report, so they knew we were there and hadn't gone off someplace. And then several times our unit had to participate in a parade ceremony in downtown Oran. And of course, the French and the British were also in that area, the Free French. And we had to participate in reveille. No. When they take down the flag.
Yes.
My mind is eluding me at the moment as to what they call that, but I think it's reveille.
Reveille.
Yeah. And you had to, we marched along the streets in Oran and stood at attention, and when they took down the flag, they played the Star Spangled Banner and God Save the Queen and the French Marseillaise. And so it was very impressive.
I'm sure it was.
And Then around the first of, or just before Thanksgiving actually, our unit was set up on the other side of Oran from where we were. And we were transported over there, and we received, more permanent tent.
Oh, it's still tents.
Oh yeah, we were tents. And the hospital at that point in time was mostly tents. The hospital units themselves, large tents. There were a couple of Quonset huts for the more, like for the operating room and for the more severely wounded and so on. But it was primarily tents to begin with. Eventually they built more permanent structures.
The Quonset hut type?
Yeah. I shouldn't say permanent, but more permanent than tents. I worked on an orthopedic ward. I remember on Thanksgiving Day, we received a large contingent of transfer patients from another hospital that was closing and moving on up into Italy. And we were very upset because they sent the patients just late in the morning, so that we had to scrounge to find food for them because I think it was kind of a quartermaster trick or something. They transferred those patients at that time, and because they had been in the other unit all morning, they got their meal ration for noon. We didn't have any. We didn't have any. So I spent most of I'd sent the other nurse on the unit with me off to lunch, and I spent most of that noon hour scrounging up food for the new incoming patients that I had on my unit. And by the time I got to lunch, which was like probably about 2 o'clock as I remember, there was hardly anything left in the officer's mess hall for me to eat. So it was not a favorable Thanksgiving. But we lived through it. And then North Africa is not real warm in the winter. We lived in those tents and we didn't have any heat in them. It was cold enough that a couple times when we got up, our washcloths that we'd used the night before were stiff. So, it got a little chilly there in the middle of the winter. I remember Christmas morning, waking up and the bugler, instead of playing the usual reveille, played White Christmas. Well, that, it made you sad.
Yes.
And
a little homesick.
Right. And we got into Oran fairly frequently. And come spring, when Naples was secure, a couple of friends of mine and I hitchhiked an airplane ride. We weren't supposed to, but we did. I can't do anything about it now, right? If I tell. We hitchhiked a ride to Naples because we wanted to see what, And again, it got summer, and we went to the beach, and on our days off and so on.
Now, where were your patients coming from?
Italy mostly. And then when there was the invasion of southern France, we got a lot of those patients too.
And were they pretty bad?
Some of them were, yes, very bad. I've often wondered whatever happened to them. And then of course we had local illnesses, like somebody that sat out on the beach too long and got a very severe sunburn, somebody who had been bitten by a stingray fish, I remember, on all types of that kind of illness.
But there was enough to keep you busy.
Oh yeah,
all the time.
We were essentially on duty 12 hours a day. Now sometimes we could take some time off in the middle of the day depending on, or get off early, get off at 3:30. There were 6 hospital units, those same 6 hospital units were all in the same area. And for competition, they formed a women's volleyball team. Well, I'm not a very sports-minded person. I particularly don't care for volleyball. But
you're a little small for that.
Yeah, I hated to see that ball coming at me. And the other nurse on the unit was a good volleyball player.
Mhm.
Well, they had to play, right after work at 3:30. So guess who always worked the split shift so the other one could go play volleyball? But our
Right.
team won
Good.
the championship for that area. So that was the way I did my part.
Well, that was in place of physical education, right?
Right,
Physical.
right.
Yeah.
And we walked, and we had bicycles available. Took bicycles out on the
Mhm.
country roads.
Yeah.
And we were in, essentially out in the country, there were a lot of Arabs and a lot of little Arab villages.
Tell us a little bit about the men who came in, the wounded men. Were they from all over? Did they have other experiences that they related to you? Just what was your relationship with the wounded?
Yeah, we talked a lot about where they were from. I remember several patients from the South, like Tennessee and so on. And those men were brought up using guns and so on. And I figured that, and some of them were very severely wounded. We had one sad case that I will never forget. A young lad who had lied about his age to get into the service.
Happens so often.
And he was a quadruple amputee, had lost both arms at, I can't remember quite at what area now, and both legs. And I think he had stepped on a mine, and he had also lost his sight. It was just so sad. And there was a letter in his record from his mother written to the commanding officer asking that he be discharged and explaining that he wasn't really, he wasn't even 17 yet when he enlisted. And but it was too late. And he had glass eyes in place. And one evening when I was on, he said they were bothering him and would I take him out. I think they always took him out at night. Well, I'd never taken out a glass eye in my life. And I knew that the surgeon in charge of our unit was over in the next hut. And so I went over and I asked him, and he says, I don't know how to do it. Here he was a brilliant surgeon, but he didn't know how to do that.
That is his promise.
No. And so finally I went back and I explained to the boy, I says, I've never done this. So he told me what to do. It wasn't that difficult. It was about like people taking out their contact lenses today. And I got them out and they soaked in a saline solution overnight.
Where did he get the glass eyes? I mean, was this part of his wounds, part of his injury, or?
His eyes had been injured during, at the same time that he sustained
So
the other.
he was blind, quadriplegic.
Oh yeah, and 17 years old at that point. I often wondered whatever happened to him. And we had lots of other cases. They would come to us from field hospitals, on the front lines over in Italy. They fought all that winter to take Monte Cassino. And we got all those wounded, and they had temporary casts on, and by the time they got to us, those casts were pretty smelly because there were wounds underneath them. Most of the wounds were, they just weren't broken bones, they were also open, they called them CCC fractures. Compound, complex, comminuted. They were, they weren't just fractured, they were shattered into little pieces. And so the casts were taken off, and sometimes they were put in traction for a while to try to get the bones straightened out right. And then when they were to be shipped on out from there, shipped on back to the States, then they were put in fresh casts. So we had patients, and
So you were sort of a way station before they went out to.
Right. because they were, there weren't the planes then to fly them back. They mostly went back by ship.
Oh, that took so
Yeah,
long.
yeah. So they had to be stabilized before. And then Italy had actually surrendered shortly after we got to North Africa. There were a lot of Italian prisoners of war around us, and they were the most part good guys. They did some of the work around the camp. If you put your shoes outside your door at night, they shined your shoes. I'm not sure if they did some laundry for us. It almost seems to me somebody did laundry for us, and then they weren't POWs anymore, really, but they kept them because Italy had surrendered.
Right.
And then the following summer, we, the war in Italy was winding down, and the Germans were up in northern part of Italy, and so we began to get kind of antsy. All the other hospital units were moving on up except us. We were the last ones to leave Africa, and we were upset and fussing about it,
Understandable.
And we weren't even getting many of the new wounded back because they were taking care of them up in Italy and then sending them on from there.
Right.
So I got assigned to a psychiatric unit, and psychiatric nursing is not my favorite. I like the orthopedic nursing much better. And what we had mostly were Americans who had committed some kind of a crime and also had a psychiatric problem. And that was kind of hard for me to deal with.
What were you supposed to do with them? I mean, the doctors probably diagnosed them, and then
And they were kept under lock and key. You had to go in through a locked door. So they received medications, so we had to give them medications. There wasn't, I don't remember treating any wounds or anything with that group. I think, it was mostly just the medication bit and keeping records and so on, talking to them. And of course, I'm a sucker for a hard luck story. They would tell me it was, not their fault, that they had been a victim of circumstances, and I was very gullible and ready to believe them. And that's why I say I did not really care for psychiatric nursing. But after just a short time of that, we suddenly got the word that we were going to move up. And when we moved up ahead of everybody else. This is what we'd been told, that when we did move, we would make a big jump.
when you say moved up to the upper
to the
part
front of Italy.
And to the front, near the front.
Nearer the front, right. We were a general hospital, so we weren't going to, general hospitals weren't right on the front lines, but we were up a lot closer. So again, in the fall of the year, we got on a hospital ship that didn't have any patients on it at that time. It was going back empty. And it was a smaller ship, and the Mediterranean was kind of rough.
Oh, wow.
And so it wasn't the most pleasant journey. And we stopped in Tripoli to pick up some Italians who were being transported back to Italy, who were still there from, had been there. And then we landed in Naples, and we were on what they call detached service in a hospital in Naples that was set up in buildings built by Mussolini for a hospital. So this was a regular hospital, a building,
Right. Equipped for
Right. And again, I was on an orthopedic or neurological unit there and saw a lot of spinal cord injuries. Men were paralyzed and would never walk again. So again, it was a very sad But for the most part, most of them got fairly cheerful, you know.
Right.
There was a big room, I imagine there were at least 20 in this ward where I was primarily. And
Were they young?
yeah, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them were quite young. Some of them were married and had families at home.
You wondered what they went home to.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say young, of course I was only, 22 at the time, so, you know, a lot of them were around my age or maybe a little older.
That
Once
was
in a
young.
while you'd run
That
into
was
somebody
young.
that was a little older. And we were there over Christmas that year and New Year's. I remember going to see Lohengrin in downtown Naples. That was a nice thing about being in Naples. They had the operas.
And it was still going?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
they were still
yeah.
performing?
I don't suppose they did right now. Naples had been bombed, and you could see bombed out areas,
Yes.
but they
It's
got
such
that
a
going
pretty
right.
city.
Yes, and I remember going to see that Lohengrin. I think it was on New Year's Eve,
Oh,
and then they tried to. The Army was good, you know. I don't know what I've forgotten what they call that branch of the service that arranged for recreation for the military, and they took us on a
Special
trip.
services.
Right. They took us on a trip to Rome. We all signed up, you know, and they took a few at a time by truck up to Rome, and we were there several days. And then I had signed up to go to the Isle of Capri and Pompeii and so on. Got transferred right before I was supposed to go. That was a story of my life. And I've always wanted to go back, and I've never gotten there. And so late in January, we got the word that we were moving on up north of Rome. And we traveled by truck. And it was not warm. And these were open, well, they had, what did they call them? They had the canvas over the back.
Oh, yes.
And
the big ribs.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there were 8 of us to a truck, 8 nurses. Well, we got up that early cold January morning to go, and naturally we knew it was going to be cold, and we drank lots of coffee, and before too long we had a little problem.
Oh, yes.
Well, they don't have service stations or rest stops back then on the way. So finally, whoever the commander was, you know, got the trucks to stop. Well, there was nothing there except fields, and the roads were built up. I think they had been built up by the military because they were up high, and they were dirt or gravel, and we just had to scramble down over this. The men went one way and the women went the other way. And the Italian farmers often, we went behind a haystack with all the Italian farmers watching us. But what could you do? What could you do?
Formed a circle around to protect each one, yeah.
And so I guess we were so slow about it that we held up the whole, because they were moving a lot of convoys up that day, and we slowed up the whole army system. So the next we stopped someplace overnight. That was in Rome. I think we made it to Rome that first day, and they put us up at someplace in Rome at an army installation. Well, the next morning, one of the officers and men in charge came around with these gallon food cans, you know, that food comes in.
Yes.
And he put one on each truck, and he said, "Here, we're not going to stop."
This will suffice.
Well, that day, wouldn't you know, there was a rest stop, a place where they stopped that there was were facilities.
Literally use the can.
So we didn't have to. And then we got, we went north of Florence to town called Pistoia. And we were set up in an old military, former military school, which has been a pretty good sized school. And it had been bombed. Part of the buildings were bombed out, and you used the other part. And I know that's the way our living quarters were. And but it certainly beat tents for hospital and taking care of patients and so on. And then you know, as spring came along, the war was going on, and let's see, by this time there had been D-Day.
Oh.
Yeah, because D-Day would have been the summer before when I was still in North Africa. It was a little hard to keep up with the news and to relate things. And that winter would have been when we were moving up, would have been around the time of the Battle of the Bulge.
Okay.
And then we were near enough the front lines. The Army was trying to push on up through Italy and get over the, I think it's the Apennine Mountains in Italy. And we could see the shell fire at night. You know, we could see the flash. And we got wounded back right from the front there, right off the battlefield. Who hadn't, you know, even some of them hadn't even been to a first aid station, or they were brought right in. So we had severely wounded there. A lot of puncture wounds, like chest puncture wounds, where you had to be very alert to
pieces of shrapnel.
Yeah,
is that what?
alert to the fact that their lungs were collapsed and so on. So, and that is where we first started using penicillin on a major scale. We had used some even back in North Africa for some things, but there, up there, we really got into using it. And penicillin at that time came in a powder and had to be mixed with sterile saline, sterile salt water. And it was so hard to mix because that powder did not dissolve easily. And we did all this by hand. We had a special crew that all they did was prepare the penicillin and go around and give it. And just about every patient in the hospital was getting it to cut down on infections and so on.
How wonderful.
So,
didn't that make your job so much easier? I mean, did you find that the penicillin helped so much that you didn't have as many people who were injured with internal infections and that sort of thing?
Yes, actually, I didn't see the overall view that much, like you're saying, because they would get shipped out before I saw the end results.
Sure.
But certainly, it must have helped save lots of lives and prevent a lot of problems from infections.
So you had to ship your people on to another hospital then?
Yeah, or some of them went from that hospital right on back to the States. Pistoia was not on the seacoast, but we weren't that far from Leghorn. And some of them may have gone on down to Naples to get shipped home.
So a lot of your people did get shipped home. I mean, but some of them didn't go back to the lines.
No, they were too severely. We seldom had anybody. Oh, maybe somebody in with a temporary wound or just an illness, like pneumonia or something. But the units I worked on, they were too severely wounded.
They must have been very severe.
Yeah. And then I remember in the spring, President Roosevelt died, and then Germany surrendered. Not too long after that, in my memory.
I think so.
And we began to get in a lot of German POWs. And while they were fighting for the German army, a lot of them were not of German nationality. We had Russians, we had Polish that had been conscripted into the German army and made to fight, you know. And they were sick, and they were very emaciated, and they had a lot of diseases. I had never taken care of a patient with diphtheria before, but we had a unit, a room, isolated, you know, isolation room with 3 prisoners that had diphtheria. And it was hard to communicate with these people, of course, because they didn't speak English, we didn't speak their language, but we tried.
I'm sure you managed.
Yeah. And again, we were back to working 12 hours a day because we were so busy. The doctors in the were running the operating room 24 hours a day, I think, doing shifts, and it was hard to get a doctor to come do anything. I learned to start IVs, which I had never done before, just simply because there was nobody else to do it.
Necessity.
And I wouldn't do it today. I wouldn't be permitted to, but you know, without special training and so on. But you just had to do
do what you had to do.
On the job training. But then it all slowed down, and eventually all those people got moved, and they went through and categorized us by age and physical condition and so on to get ready to send us to the South Pacific. The older nurses and the ones who maybe had some kind of a physical limitation that they had developed, they were going to come home, but we were going to the South Pacific. I was young and healthy. And,
were you looking forward to it?
Well, it didn't bother me that much, really. I thought, well, it's just some more.
Another experience.
Right. And we were over in Leghorn waiting, again, getting shots and all of the paperwork and so on. And the atom bomb dropped. Well, that was big news. We weren't too sure quite what the atom bomb was. We hadn't, you know, we didn't get the New York Times every day and so on, but, you know, we knew it was not good. And so it was just about 2 or 3 days later that we got on the ship, and we started sailing down the west coast of Italy. And we were just on that ship a couple of days, and they told us we were coming home instead of going to the South Pacific. I suppose it took that long to, you know, for trickle down and so on. So we came across and landed in Boston. One thing I forgot to mention was that back in North Africa, one time we got awakened in the middle of the night, about 3 o'clock in the morning, it seems to me. And we had to all go report to the aid station or something to get an injection for bubonic plague. A man had died in Algiers, which was a couple 100 miles from Oran, with bubonic plague. So the immediate order went out, and our commanding officer was very, what we call GI. He followed the law to the letter. So if they said vaccinate immediately, so we all got out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning to get vaccinated immediately. And then we had to have a second injection. Fortunately, that was given in the daytime, a week or so later. Those bubonic plague shots were not pleasant. My arm was sore for a long time.
Right? Were there any cases in the area that you were in?
Not right there, but just this man that had died. That was all we heard. Now, you know, like I say, there wasn't, you know, and naturally I can see. And then getting ready to go to the South Pacific, we had to have injections for cholera. Those weren't that pleasant either.
That night.
No. And I'm never worried about getting smallpox because I had more smallpox vaccinations. I just read in the paper the other day that
carried through.
there might be some immunity still. But
interesting. Yeah. Well, then you went through a lot. I mean, look at where you went. I mean, you were in 3 different countries.
2.
States.
Well, the states,
and
South
then South Africa, and then
North
Northern
Africa, and Italy.
And then Italy. And they were all different experiences.
Yes,
weren't
they were.
Did you, when you came home, did you continue nursing?
Yes.
And did you find that the things that you had learned and gone through while you were in the service applied?
To some extent, yes. Because I taught orthopedic nursing for a while. So.
And your experience in the orthopedic hospital?
Yeah. Yes, it did.
Now, was that here in Elmira, or was that in?
Well, I taught orthopedic nursing down at St. Joe's for a while. Or at least, it was not. When I first got back, as I had said, our ship landed in Boston. My mother lived in California, and the Army let you pick where you wanted your transportation to, what you were going to call home. And even though that wasn't my home address of record, I picked California. I figured I might as well go the furthest I could get.
Yes.
And we were given, first we were given 30 days leave, and then they extended it to 45. They didn't know what to do with everybody when, the war ended so abruptly. And so 2 other nurses and I were going to California. And we had a compartment from Boston to Sacramento. And while we were on the train, Japan surrendered. Well, that was a big night of hilarity on the train.
I remember where I was too.
Where were you?
I was on a train.
Oh, really? What a coincidence. And then we were sent up to Camp Beale for just a day or 2. And then my mother was living in San Diego at that time, so I went down to San Diego and spent some time with her. And then went to Wyoming to spend time with some friends and some other family members. And then eventually ended up at Camp Beale.
You hadn't been discharged yet?
No. And I found out that I had to go to Alabama to be discharged. So I did a lot of traveling around over the country, and that was just before Thanksgiving, because when I left Alabama, I went up to Indiana to spend Thanksgiving with my grandparents who lived in northern Indiana. And then I wound my way out west again, and I had been to San Francisco while I was at Camp Beale, and had applied for a job in the hospital there as an instructor. And
do you feel that your time in the service changed you in any way?
Yes, I think it certainly made me more mature. Going in at a relatively young age, and
did it change your ideas about nursing at all?
No, I don't believe so. Not about nursing.
I mean, you wanted to stay in nursing?
Yes. Yes, I stayed in the rest of my working days.
Did you keep in touch with have you kept in touch with any of the people with whom you worked?
I did for a long time, but I've lost contact with them all now. Okay. The last I knew, one of those women who had gone, when I met on the train on the day I reported for active service, I kept and saw her one time. She came to her husband was from Elmira by coincidence, a very strange coincidence. They had met in Florida, I think, but they had come up here to settle some property that his family had or something, and she came over to see me in Horseheads. And we exchanged cards for a long time, but I don't know what happened. I just haven't heard from her for a while. And of course, when you get to be my age, you wonder. And then the others just kind of, you know, slowly we lost track of each other. I think of them.
I'm sure. Are you happy, pleased that you went in and you spent the time in the
yes.
service?
I am.
Felt you accomplished something.
Yes. Accomplished something, and you know,
I mean,
it was something that you never forget. It's a big part of my life.
Yeah, I understand. How did your parents in the beginning feel about you going in, and how did they react when you came home?
I think my father was worried. He told me when I got home that they had read about a ship being sunk that had nurses on it, and he worried until he heard from me. But I wasn't even aware of the fact that, you know, we didn't get a lot of news. My mother never wanted me to be a nurse in the first place, so she, but she tolerated it.
Right. Well, I appreciate this. You've told me most of them. I know your most memorable. What was your most memorable experience? Anything that you didn't tell us about?
I don't know, there's so many.
And what was your worst, can you remember your worst moment? Not important, I just wondered.
I can't.
Something. Yeah.
Well, probably getting seasick was one of the worst moments, both on that, going across the Mediterranean, and then the first day or two we were out, you know, sailed out of, it's probably one of the worst.
Well, thank you very, very much, Bernice. It was very interesting, and I appreciate your taking the time to.
My pleasure. I did a lot of talking.
That's what you're supposed to do. I think I have this off now. I don't know whether we've been talking for an hour or not. I think we've been over an hour.
She was going to come in and change the tape. Maybe this.
Maybe.
Well, by the time we got started.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
I appreciate your asking.
Well, I'm so glad that I did, because I first of all enjoyed meeting you, and second of all, your experiences were fascinating to me.
Well, I hope they made sense the way I said it.
They certainly did.
I'm glad I found these notes yesterday and kind of reviewed them.
Yes.
I didn't want to come in cold.
No, I know. I know.
Tried to.
But it's funny. It's as I said, I have started writing my memoirs, and so that's what started me. I was interviewed too. That's what got me started on this. And then I decided I would do some more people. And so I just went, you know, and that's what brought things to mind, you know, because I carry, yes, come on in there. We're through.
You're through?
Yes, thank you. I don't know how long we talked.